In these days of forbidden doors getting smashed down and fed into wood chippers, companies seem to be forming new relationships all the time. Sometimes those agreements fizzle out, but other times one side does something to deeply anger the other. Back in December of 1999, WCW's on-again off-again head writer Vince Russo booked a rather legendary several-month run of Nitros that were so bad they were at times hilarious. I have several memories from this run of Nitros that I'm sure I'll get to on this channel, but let me know if you have any in the comment section below. Near the end of that first run, he seemed to have gotten bored of pissing off the Western world and turned his efforts to angering New Japan Pro Wrestling, the company WCW had been working with since the early 90s, maybe earlier. One thing that New Japan is known for taking very seriously is the handling of their talents when they travel overseas. One notable example of this is when they ended their several-year relationship with TNA over the way one talent on excursion was booked to be a joke. He was known as Okato in the Impact Zone, heavily inspired by Kato from the Green Hornet, even looking like him, and mainly wrestling on the lower cards and the syndicated shows. This man would return to Japan in 2012 and go on to become one of New Japan's biggest stars ever, Kazuchika Okada. Incidentally, who do you think TNA's writer was at that time? Do you have any guesses, bro? Nowadays, the relationship between the two companies seems to have been rebuilt, given that several New Japan talents have worked Impact over the past few years. Some even initiated into the Bullet Club, but it took a long time, a complete regime change, and several rebrands for this to happen. Another thing New Japan takes very seriously is the lineage of its championships, usually. The current ongoing situation with Carl Anderson feels like a strange anomaly from this right now. But usually if a champion fails to make an advertised match, they are promptly stripped of that championship as soon as possible, and they are often very strict about this. Togi Makabe was once stripped of his never openweight title for being stricken with the flu, but won the title back 2 months later and resumed the run he was intended to have. More recently, in 2019, Jon Moxley was stripped of the IWGP US title after a typhoon in Japan meant that he wouldn't be able to get into the country. He would also win back the title at earliest convenience and hold it for another 6 months. The reason I bring these things up is that Vince Russo managed to annoy New Japan on both of these grounds on the November 29th, 1999 episode of Nitro. On this night, Russo booked a match between the IWGP Junior Heavyweight Champion Jushin Thunder Liger and Juventud Guerrera. Neither man got any entrance or introduction as we came back from the ad break, with both men already in the ring. Seconds into the match, before the two can even tie up, Buzzkill walks down the ramp. Buzzkill was a hippie played by Brad Armstrong, who was supposed to be a parody of his own brother in WWE, the Road Dogg Jesse James. In the ring, Liger and Juvi tried their best to have a good match, but it's hard to focus on it with Buzzkill being insufferable on commentary. He acts as though he has no concept of what wrestling is, with Tony Schiavone and Bobby Heenan having to explain that they are two men competing for a championship, begging the question, why and how did he even get there? Tony then mentions that Juvi is fighting for his work visa in this match, which makes even less sense and is never mentioned again. When Juventud signals he's going to try for his Juvi driver, Buzzkill gets up and starts distracting the referee for seemingly no reason, as he has no affiliation with either man. With the referee distracted, Juvi smashes a tequila bottle over Liger's head, and the ref counts for 3, despite there being glass all over the ring. We don't even get to see Juventud celebrate with the title, as seconds after the 3 count, we cut to something completely different. In fact, we never actually saw the physical belt at all. Liger would later claim that the belt had been lost. In the following week's Wrestling Observer, Dave Meltzer writes that the booking of Liger was forced upon Russo, and he indicated that Bro wasn't happy with it either. Dave also points out that WCW is only watched by hardcore fans in Japan, and they perceive Juventud as a lower card wrestler who never gets a push. WCW forcing Russo to use Liger might explain the awful segment, the lack of introduction or explanation, the terrible interference by Buzzkill, and his solution to retcon it all the following week. He couldn't just book a straight rematch, because Juventud injured his elbow on a dive in the match, so to pick his replacement, the powers that be, played by Russo himself but only his voice, called Psychosis and Lapaka into his office. He explained that the first man to leave the room would be the one to defend one of the most prestigious titles in all of wrestling. Psychosis wins this dubious honour, and even walks out with the title belt on his shoulder. Once again, Liger and Psychosis attempt to have a good match, and once again Buzzkill lives up to his name, this time handing flowers out in the crowd. This is made even worse by there being so many crowd signs that they can barely get a camera shot of him, and they eventually give up. To be fair though, this match got a lot more time and focus than the prior week's match did, and was a very good cruiserweight match that saw Liger win cleanly with a La Magistral. This moment of good wrestling is overshadowed in seconds by Lapaka coming out to get his revenge on Psychosis. But at least Liger got the title back in the ring. This whole situation made New Japan very upset, and only years later did they officially recognise either title change. Over the years since, and as recently as 2022, ahead of the Forbidden Door event, Vince Russo has been consistently critical of the use of international talent, and still can't see their value. This feels like a really narrow-minded approach, given how several years after WCW folded, SmackDown was very popular among Hispanic viewers, thanks to its two top stars being Eddie Guerrero and Rey Mysterio. These days, most top-level wrestling rosters are extremely diverse, with many more countries represented, which can only be seen as a positive in today's world of global media. Thank you for watching yet another wrestling channel. If you enjoyed this, please leave a comment, consider liking or subscribing.